Hi, I'm Chris Maragkakis of Simply Be Retreats and Therapies. I'm a life coach, therapist and podcaster. Welcome to Mindful Mutterings. Please like, share and subscribe. And as always, thanks for listening. Hi, thanks for listening. This week I'm joined by Julie Court of Julie Court Nutrition, who is an award-winning menopause coach. So Julie, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
So obviously menopause is in the news a lot at the moment, especially with the Venus campaign and everything else. So how did you come about getting into menopause, and how do you balance that with nutritional needs?
Okay, so I am 42, coming up 43 now, and perimenopausal. So my experience of menopause began really probably when I was about 37, 38, but I just didn't realise it at the time. So I was marathon training, and my periods became a bit erratic, sometimes heavy, further apart. And I just put that down to the training at the time, because obviously it's pretty intense. Once the marathon was over, I was still experiencing changes in my periods, but then I had other issues come up, like really sore, tender breasts. I developed a skin complaint called rosacea, and I saw GPs independently about each of those things, but no one at any point pulled those together as being perimenopausal.
Right.
I had gone off and had a pretty invasive hysteroscopy at the time, and they just came back and said, well, you got dysfunctional periods.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that. Knowing what I know now, I wish I'd known what I knew then, because I would have, been able to pull all that together and join the dots. But instead, I was just kind of left floating with various different symptoms. And menopause wasn't on my radar at all at that point. We moved not long after that, and I had trained in the meantime. After I'd finished my maternity leave, I'd retrained in nutrition.
Right.
So my background was mainly weight management. And then we moved, and of course you're meeting all these new people, you've got to introduce yourself. And I was getting many more symptoms. I'd really ramped up at that stage. So I wasn't sleeping very well. I was getting hot flushes, the brain fog. And it was only when a friend of mine asked me, did I know anything about menopause in relation to nutrition, that it was on my radar at all.
Right.
So I took myself off. I did some more training in nutrition for menopause at the Institute of Optimum Nutrition, and that was it. Then I was down the rabbit hole, and everything was menopause from that stage onwards. Right. So I was able to identify at that point that I was pretty much perimenopausal, and able to offset a lot of my symptoms through optimizing my diet, really, making little tweaks here and there.
So what kind of things do you need to avoid then while you're menopausal?
In terms of diet?
Yeah.
So most people generally know the sort of things that they should be doing. A Mediterranean style diet is generally pretty helpful. Many of the women that I come across are just really have been eating really restrictive fatty diets, because it's always been about calories for them.
Right.
Whereas it's more about varieties, all the basics that you need to be thinking about. So, more protein. It's getting the balance right. That's what I tend to find more than anything else. It's not overcomplicating it in terms of, because you'll see people on social media saying, eat this for this symptom.
Yeah.
And it becomes very restrictive and very focused on eating these supposed superfoods. But what I tend to find is it's more about balance. So if you're looking at a plate, so for example, like a meal like spaghetti bolognese, classic that everyone's always had. We would always have a massive bowl of pasta with a little bit of sauce and a little bit of mince on top. But really, particularly in perimenopause, it just needs to adjust that. So the amount of carb that you're having is smaller than what it was before.
Right.
So you'd be saying like a quarter carb, quarter protein, and half a plate veg. So if you can focus all your meals and kind of get in that rough kind of balance, you're in the right ballpark.
Right, okay, so not difficult then. It doesn't have to be
No.
difficult. Because I think a lot of the stuff that's going on around menopause and how it's coming into the public consciousness, the biggest problem seems to be the brain fog. I mean, I know women that have given up their jobs because they felt that they maybe had onset dementia, or and they've been terrified, absolutely terrified that maybe this is it. And then obviously they've had interventions and they found out that it was their menopause, and they've made life-changing decisions because they've not been diagnosed correctly.
Yeah, many women have left work. I think there's what's the statistic? Something like 50%, something of over 65.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So brain fog, yes, there's many different factors with that. I mean, if you're not sleeping well for a start, but if you're not nourishing and fueling your body at the same time, and working with it, then I think with everything menopause, it's not just one factor. It's a jigsaw really, and it's bringing all of those pieces together. Identifying what they are for you and bringing them together so that you can work with these symptoms.
So for you then, what did you have to change from? So like we all know that we're supposed to exercise and 10,000 steps and all the rest of it. But do you carry on doing the same exercise into your 50s and 60s that you've always done, or do you need to adapt stuff?
No, you do need to adapt it quite considerably, and I found this out really to my own detriment. So like I mentioned, I was training for a marathon, so I ended up doing 2 marathons. I still run, but not to the extent that I was then. Like many women back then, I was doing a lot of Joe Wicks, like the HIIT work, like really like intensive workouts. And stress is a massive factor for menopause symptoms and managing your weight. Right. Now, your body doesn't differentiate between the stress of high impact exercise to the stress that you get from work, to the stress that you feel from not sleeping or perceived stress. And managing that is a really important part of it. So, and also when you're not sleeping and you're exercising in that way, you're not allowing your body that time to recover, which I found out to my detriment. Right. I started getting lots of niggles. I became injured. I injured my lower back, and typical of me at that time, and a lot of the women that are hitting perimenopause and menopause, is that you're pushing yourself harder and harder to try and see results, and actually that's working against you. So when I was injured, I saw an osteopath, and then I was back out doing a 10k 4 weeks later, because you're trying to just doing what you were or push for more because you're not seeing results anymore. Right.
So what did you change to then? If you went from the high impact, what did you change to?
So I changed to, well, I was forced to change by my injury. So last summer, I've only really in the last year recovered from that injury. It's taken me a full year to really come back from that. In that time, I had to swap to walking, just so that, because my body does need movement, and I think a lot of people find that you do need to move, and you feel the benefit of that.
I think the older you get, the more you seize up as well. If you don't keep it active, you lose it.
Yeah, definitely. But it's working with what you've got, and that's what I say about when you've got to ride the wave of menopause rather than fighting it. Yeah. So we've got these injuries, like I say, the sleep issue. If you're waking up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and just laying there, you might as well get up and use that time.
You might as well.
And actually, for me, that was a bit of a game changer. So I was getting out moving, but seeing it become quite meditative as well for me, because I was seeing sunrises that I might not have seen. I was hearing the bird song, people were in bed and I was out on my paddleboard, and also in terms of brain fog, like you mentioned, I was able to function way better in the morning than what I was in the afternoon. So all those kind of important jobs that I needed doing for work, I would try and get those done in the morning, so that by the afternoon, when the brain fog would really set in. And
there is lots of research about how beneficial it is to get up early in the morning anyway. So what we're saying then is stress is a massive contributor to menopausal symptoms, and that it's about accepting the reality of what your body's going through. I mean, for a lot of people, this is a massive attitude shift, because they kind of perceive menopause as the beginning of the end, and there's a lot of issues around self-esteem and confidence with that, where kind of you're on the scrap heap, you're at the end of your life. And I think we need to really work to turn that around, because actually it's a very exciting phase. We've done, for most of us, we've either conquered the career or raised a family or done whatever it is we're going to do, and this is where we get to do what's best for us. And it's changing that mindset into the fact that this is actually a golden age of opportunity. So what did you find that you had to do most about the way that you were viewing what your body was going through and how you needed to make the changes in your life?
So for me personally, I think it was an acceptance. I think I probably initially had that thought like, oh, I'm only in my early 40s and am I old and washed up now? But I quickly kind of got over that. I think with the women that I work with, I find that they are at the peak of their careers professionally, that they are still juggling hormonal teenagers at home.
Yeah.
Or they've got elderly parents that they might be caring for, and that they're not prioritising their own needs and their own health. And actually, it takes almost working with me and me giving them permission to prioritise themselves that changes that for them. And that is the beginning of getting them in a position to see this as a positive change in their life. Without a doubt, it is tough at times.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of upheaval, a lot of difficult emotions to deal with, but I think you come out the other side is transformed. And
I would agree. I mean, I'm 54, so I've further along my journey than you are. But also, I think the biggest barrier for most women is the idea of spending money on themselves, like to get the help that they want, or like with coaching, you can change your mindset, and if you change your mindset, you can change your life. So with the food, it's about learning what to do and how to make it simple so that you can integrate it into your life. The mindset, it's about changing what you're thinking and the behaviours that you have. But the biggest one has to be that women don't tend to value themselves, their needs, and obviously, even if they're not running a family, even if they're, wherever they're working, whatever they need to do for them will impact beneficially on everyone else around them. So this idea that women shouldn't take care of themselves, I don't really know where that comes from. Because if you educate a woman about how to manage her health and her well-being and how she can accept the changes her body's going through, and you can't fight them, the body is doing exactly what it's designed for and it does it very well, then she can help the next generation coming forward. We can improve workplace awareness. And I just think that women have to stop putting themselves second for all these. We have to stop thinking we need to conquer our bodies, and we actually have to work with them and change our mindset accordingly for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's a big part of it. But there's a big part of the way that we work is focusing on how they feel. The changes that we make are all very small adjustments in lifestyle, in diet, and they could be really small things. Like, let me think of something like stopping caffeine at lunchtime. Yeah. So they can really identify the change that they experience to what the action that they've put in place.
Yeah. So you can see results
quickly.
Can
see results quickly, rather than throwing the whole kitchen sink at it.
Yeah.
And only one of those things working. You can actually identify that it's this one thing.
Yeah.
And that momentum is a layering really of all the things that we do.
But it's the same, isn't it? It's same with changing a mindset. It's small, consistent changes that make the biggest results. But I also think at the moment there's an overwhelming amount of information, and it's not knowing which way to turn. And so you start to do everything, and then it just becomes too much, and you give up on everything. Whereas when you have a coach or you have someone else that can person centre that for you, then it's tailored to you and your needs and how your body's working, and that's how you make the biggest improvements moving forward.
Yeah, definitely, because the behaviour change side of it really is the biggest part of the work for me. It's actually where the magic really happens.
Yeah.
Because it's meeting the person where they are now.
Yeah.
Generally, they know a few things that can get them started, and it's finding out what motivates them, what's easy, what makes them excited.
Yeah.
Because we don't bring about long-term change by restricting calories, fatty diets, punishing fitness regimes. We make long-term change through feeling good about ourselves and being positive.
Yeah, and it's that loving themselves, isn't it? It's being kind to yourself and understanding who you are and what you need. And if you're not fulfilled and if you're not being authentic, then obviously that brings more stress with it, which will make the symptoms of menopause so much worse.
Definitely agree.
So what are your next steps, and what else do you do? So obviously you do the coaching, menopause and nutrition, but what else, if women wanted to work with you, could they do?
So next year I've got my weekend retreat in Suffolk.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. It's a really lovely accommodation. We've got an indoor pool, we've got an outdoor hot tub. It's exclusively used for us, it'll just be us there.
Very nice.
We've got outdoor lounge area with hammocks in the trees.
I'm sold already, yeah.
So we'll be having nutrition sessions, we'll be having twice daily breathwork sessions. Got a chef coming in to cook us a 3-course meal, walks around the farm. But really it's for women, they can do as much or as little as they want while they're there. It's time to really focus and prioritise on themselves. Learn some tools that they can go away with. But what I find is probably at the centre of all the retreats and the days that I run is that sense of community. Yeah. So it's coming together with women that know exactly how you're feeling, so you haven't got to explain yourself, and sharing and having a good belly laugh at some of the things that you've done. You know,
what that's happening to you. And I think that's, I mean, like, it's very important. Obviously I run women's circles, and having women come together in sacred spaces, which is anything that's private and fosters that sense of belonging, is so vital, and it just builds on self-esteem and it builds on coping strategies. And also you've got the wisdom of all these women that have been through so many different things, and sometimes someone can say something to you and you miss it, and someone else says it in a different setting or in a different way, and it's like a light bulb moment. Yeah, I completely agree with that. So pranayama, you mentioned breath work, so how does that support with the menopausal food then?
So it's really linking in with the stress management side of things. So if you're, so let me try and think of the easiest way to explain this. So when we're going through perimenopause and into menopause, so we know that you are losing estrogen from your ovary production. But while that's happening, your adrenals are able to produce a backup type of estrogen. But if you are chronically stressed, then you know you're prioritizing those stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and that estrogen just gets put on the back burner. Therefore, you see an increase in your symptoms. But that's also partly where some of the weight gain comes from in your middle, because your fat cells are also able to produce another type of estrogen. So if you can't get what you need from your adrenals, then your body's going to search that out elsewhere. So that's where I feel like women feel like maybe their bodies are working against them. But it's not. It's actually your body trying to protect you. So in terms of managing your weight, in terms of managing your symptoms, if we can work on the stress side of things, then that was really going to feed into the nutrition and HRT, if you want to do it, to bring all those pieces of the jigsaw together to help you feel like yourself again.
Brilliant. Yeah, and as always, it's all about balance, isn't it?
Definitely.
And it's about matching the mindset with the physicality. Thank you so much for joining me today. If anyone would like to work with Julie, or you're interested in her retreat, you can find it on her website, which is
juliecourtnutrition.com,
which I will put in the comments for this podcast. If you've got any questions and you want to ask Julie anything about the menopause or nutrition, you can do it via my website, simplybe.org.uk, or you can contact Julie directly. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you join me for the next one. Bye.